Inspired Talks. Om Namasri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Sachit Sukhaswarupaya Swami Netapaharine. In the previous talk, there was some problem with our connection, so the talk was disrupted. So we'll begin exactly where we had left. And today also we are having some connection issues. So in case you find that the talk is not getting live streamed, please wait for a few seconds or wait for our message. So in case there is some disturbance, maybe we will wait till it comes back. And if it doesn't come back, say in 3 or 4 minutes, then we will stop. So we had been discussing the previous day that in the state of sattva, we see the very nature of things and we go beyond the senses and beyond reason. So this is one theme that keeps coming. And in every religion, we find that they say, be good. Now, why be good? Not because some scriptures are dictating and not even because some prophet has said. It is simply because it is directly related to your being. We have discussed it many times that we are combination of sattva, rajas, and tamas. As we start working more and more, as we become more and more active, our mind becomes more and more rajasic, full of rajas, full of activity. And from there, when we try to overcome our selfishness, when our selfishness reduces, we start becoming sattvic. And only when we become sattvic, we see things the way they are. So we had discussed this. Now from there, we will begin from the sentence that this rascal ego must be obliterated. This is where we had stopped. Actually, Swamiji is using the term rascal ego. This is a translation of what Thakur used to say, Thakur Sri Ramakrishna used to say, is Sala Rami. Sala is a word in Bengali which is sometimes used to express some kind of cuteness. It's not always an abusive word. So Sri Ramakrishna repeatedly used this expression, Salami, Bajjatami, Bajjatami. He used to say Bajjatami. Bajjat is rascal, rascalous in that sense. So now we are discussing June 26th talk. And in this long talk that we'll try to cover today, we'll try to go a little fast. We have been going pretty slow. There are three distinct things that Swamiji will be discussing today. First of this is that this rascal ego must be obliterated. So first discussion is on, we have all the power, we have all the freedom, we have all knowledge, we have all strength, everything. Unfortunately, we create our own ego. We are one with God. We are one with pure consciousness. And that consciousness being all powerful, it creates some kind of shelter, say in open meadow. If you might have seen pictures of, say, Switzerland and all, you'll find that it's all meadows. And suddenly there springs a house. You create a house and you say that I'm shutting off all the sunshine and all the wind that's coming. You're the master. You can do anything. It's something like I hold my one hand with the other and say, now I cannot free it. Nobody can free it because you yourself are holding your other hand. Who can free it? No one can. Now, these things belong to very high perspective of religion. And ordinarily, particularly in dualistic religions, you can never come across this kind of thought. These are too exalted thoughts. See, a few days ago, I was talking to one of my very close friends, and And senior IS officer, he was telling that, see, whenever he was saying, whenever he reads these inspired talks or listens to these talks, he feels that these talks were delivered by Swamiji when he was hardly 32, 33. Just imagine what you were doing when you were 32, 33. So he was telling that when I look back at my own life, I think what I would have been doing if I were in this life, maybe I would have read inspired talks many times, maybe I would have tried to understand. But the very idea that Swamiji was delivering talks at this level, which is at its subtlest and at its grandest. So you find these two things, the sheer grandness, and the subtlety. So there is majesty and there is also the fine touch. And we need to have some basic preparation to understand these words. So, first of them is that there is this ego. Where from has this ego where from has this ego come? Now, if you believe in some God who is separate from you, well, then it's God's will. Why God willed it? Now you cannot question that. If you are a pure Advaitin, which we expect that anyone who is listening to these talks, at least during the time of the talk, he would behave and he would try to feel that he is a Vedantin, he is an Advaitin. In Advaita, there is no two. There is one single existence. Now, if there is one single existence, then what remains? Pure consciousness. Who am I? I am that pure consciousness. And so, why don't I feel it? I don't feel it because I don't want to feel it. Once Swamiji was delivering a talk in America, and you can feel the flow of thoughts that Swamiji had. And there was one lady. After the class, she got up and she said that, look, what you are talking may be good, but I don't want to be one with Atman. I see divinity in my jewelry, in my wealth. And Swamiji says, that's perfectly fine. You keep seeing yourself, you keep identifying yourself with all your jewelry and your wealth for thousands of births, and then a time will come when you will make a turnaround. Actually, this is the problem. We have created this own world. This is something which will keep coming again and again in these talks. Everything that you see, the world around you, your wife, your children, your wealth, your everything, and your identifications, these are all your own creation. And this is the creation by the ego. The Lord said, I am one. Ekoham bahusyam prajayami. I want to be many. I am one with that Lord. I just wanted to feel how I look when I am many. And ego came into existence. Now that we are in trouble, now that we are suffering, now we want to go back. Now, because we have created, once you create something yourself, like, we mentioned some of these stories like Pygmalion and Narcissus. You see something, you create something, and you fall in love with that. You don't want to give that up. So, ego, my ego, your ego, this is the only force that restricts the full flow of divinity within us. Why we don't have knowledge? Because we don't want. Why we don't have strength? Because we don't want. Why we don't have freedom? Because we don't want. What is that we? It is that ego. And this ego is created by me myself. Because I am all powerful. There are many stories when this incarnation or that incarnation, Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, they were behaving oddly under certain conditions, and then there was some force was applied and they became free. Now, the words of Swamiji that we are studying here, or when you study Upanishads or Gita, these are those words that break you free of that, provided you want. Second thing that Swamiji will be discussing is that the power of word, assuming that this existence is true, assuming that this ego is true, how will we get power? Supposing I don't want to be one with God, I don't want to break down my world, I don't want to get rid of my ego. What is the next best possible thing? It says purity and silence. This is the second point. And third, purpose of life. Purpose of life is not to be a personality, but to be one with principles. So these are the three things we shall be discussing. That ego is what restricts the full flow of divinity within us. We lack in power. We lack whatever lacking we have. We are small. We are puny little creatures. Why? Simply because we are holding on to our ego. Now, before we continue with this is a very simple thing Swamiji is discussing. Think how much good they are doing. Bless men when they revile you. Think how much good they are doing you. They can only hurt themselves. The people who are insulting you, reviling you, spreading canards about you, and all the negative things about you, actually they do good to you. How? This ego that you have created, the huge wall, adamantine wall that you have created. What is this adamantine wall? What is this ego? It is the self-projection of our goodness. Self-projection of our goodness that comes as wall around us. Think of one of those famous mob persons, gangsters. They think that if they have killed many persons and if they have caused mayhem, bloodshed, they are great. That's how the greatness of a mob person is judged. He feels his strength, he feels his goodness in bloodshed, in killings. So there was this famous mobster in New York, Al Capone. He did all kinds of wrong things. And finally, when the rule pounced upon him, his world came crashing down. A good person, a noble person, he also has created a world of good feelings about himself. And here comes a critic, here comes a person who reviles him, and he crashes him down. Be it good, be it bad. Be qualities good, be qualities bad. They are mere boundaries around the free flow of energy, free flow of power. They need to be broken down. If you cannot break it down yourself, other forces will come and break it down. And people who are negative about you, people who criticize you, people who hurt you, they are actually breaking down that, provided you want to be a spiritual person. Mind it. If you want to be a spiritual person, if your goal is not to be a spiritual person, it only means that you want to create more and more walls of ego around yourself so that you can bask in your own glory. First you do something good, then you think very highly of yourself, then that itself becomes a wall, and you think that actually doing good is some kind of energy, and then you start basking in that energy. If you want to be spiritual, that wall has to be broken down. And when your own soul feels that I need to be free, being one with God arranges for people who will come and break down those walls. If you want to be spiritual, if you truly want to be spiritual, never be upset with criticism. Kabir Das has very famously written in Hindi, Nindak ko rakhiye angan kuti chhawaye. Persons who are reviling you, those who are critics, those who are genuine critics of you, create a hutment for them in your own courtyard and keep them there. When they criticize you, they are actually cleaning you up. The way mom cleans up a baby, the baby goes out, her son, her daughter goes out and plays and collects a lot of dirt. Mom catches hold of her baby and washes her up, cleans her up. Critics are those people who clean our dirt. As far as hurting is concerned, they hurt themselves. Simple example we are giving: Jesus was crucified. Now, there cannot be a worse reviling than that. And see the consequences. What happened to the Jewish race for next 2000 years? Go where people hate you. Let them thrash the ego out of you and you will get nearer to the Lord. Mind it. The condition is that if you want to be near God, one example that I often use: when a baby gets hurt by the world, it runs to its mom. Now, what happens when mom hits? The baby holds on to mom more fiercely, more intensely, because baby knows that it has nowhere to go other than her mom. Once you have become dependent on God, truly dependent on God, so your worldly connections are now gone. And suddenly comes attacks of different kinds. People may know that you are a man of God, but they will not spare you. They have their own selfishness, they have their own hidden agendas, and they have their own axe to grind. They will hit you. Where do you go now? You don't have any support system. So where do you go? Then you hold on to God much more intensely, because you don't have anywhere to go. Because you don't have anywhere to go. In misery, you go nearer to God. A common man doesn't. A general person, you see, that's why not many people can listen to our talks. It's not even possible for them to hold on to such ideas. And these talks are meant for those sincere seekers who truly want to be one with God. So for them, misery is something very important. The more miserable you are, nearer to God you go. It's not meant for common people, because they cannot. Common people also suffer. They have to suffer. Everybody has to suffer in this world, because ultimately, as far as Atman is concerned, as far as pure consciousness is concerned, Jesus is in no way different than, say, Brutus. And the highest saint is no way different from the greatest of sinner, if you believe in sin. Pure consciousness will never like to remain confined permanently within the limits of the ego. In case of saints, the hits come in quick successions. In case of the worldly, those who want to enjoy the world for a long time, for them, suffering comes greater intervals, because it allows you rest. See, a person, there is some tourist traveling in the Himalayas. The tourist will stop at the nearest dhaba whenever they find one dhaba, because they are enjoying. For them, journey is as good as destination. But a person who is into mountain climbing, he cannot afford to stop here and there. Once you are into spiritual life, you are like a mountain climber. Even if you feel that your lungs are bursting, you have to move on. People who are in the world, they are like the tourists. Sometimes they enjoy the sights. Sometimes they enjoy a cup of tea. I have one friend, during journeys, he likes to have jalebis and samosas and everything of this shop and that shop and in the hills and mountains. They say that enjoy the local cuisine. But a mountain climber cannot afford to do. And that's why their suffering is much more. And every time there is suffering, even for a common man, it's a reminder from God that you cannot hold on to this permanently. Move on, move on, move on. Believe me, these are higher ideals, and like any high ideal, it is very difficult to grasp, very difficult to practice. We need not practice, even if we keep listening, they create some impression, and when the right time comes, we know how to move on. And like the mother monkey, we hug our baby, the world, as long as we can. But at last, when we are driven to put it under our feet and step on it, then we are ready to come to God. What happens? In a monkey herd, there's only one male. And whenever a mother monkey gives birth to any female, the father kills that girl monkey. Sorry, the male monkey. It won't allow any male monkey to be born. Female monkeys are allowed, but males are not allowed. So once that male is killed, mom cannot let go of, cannot let go of its baby monkey. So it keeps on holding to that baby till it's completely rotten. Now, one experiment was made at how sincere they are. So monkey was kept in an enclosure, and heat was applied beneath the surface. So the mother monkey, she kept on changing her legs to balance that heat. And ultimately, when it could not, it threw the baby down and stood on it. So what happens that this world is like that dead baby monkey to us. We are holding on to it. It's a dead body, stinking. The carcass starts rotting. We need to throw it down, but we don't want to throw down. You may have got a job with great difficulty, and then you find that there is difficulty, and difficulty. It's like that baby monkey which is rotting. There's a relationship. And nowadays you'll find that people have become so self-centered that most relationships are completely rotten, so rotten that it stinks. But when we got into that relationship, it was with so much of love that we don't want to give that up. And this stink keeps increasing because it's rotten. Finally, a time comes when we give up that rotten relationship, and suddenly we realize, oh my God, we are free. You should have given that up long ago. This entire world of ours, this world in which we are, it's just like that rotten relationship. It's just like the dead baby monkey. So, blessed it's to be persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Blessed are we if we cannot read. We have less to take us away from God. See, it's all about ego. As we mentioned in the beginning, there's a huge middle. There is sunlight and there is wind and there's all the good things that you can think of. And we create a hut, we enter there and we say that there is no light, there is no warmth, and it's all cold and we cannot see anything. You created it. Now, all these things, that misery and learning and wealth and relationships, these are all products of ego. Now, before we continue, just let me talk of a wonderful thing from Swamiji's life. I personally had struggled for many years on this problem, that when When Swami Vivekananda had all these spiritual experiences that he could with Sri Ramakrishna, then why after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna in 1886, Swamiji kept wandering all over the country, kept roaming all over the country for the next 7 years? More importantly, he went to Pavhari Baba and wanted to make Pavhari Baba his own guru so that he could attain Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And there for 21 days consecutively without break, whenever Swami Vivekananda wanted to go to Pavhari Baba to take initiation from him, Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna's face stood in front of him on the wall with very sad eyes. Idea being, how come you are leaving me? Then after the struggle of 21 days, Swamiji gave up the idea of being a disciple of Pavhari Baba. This is number one. Number two is, then why Swamiji was moving around the whole country for 7 years like someone possessed, someone in deep pain? Why? See, somewhere Swamiji was not satisfied with himself. We are talking about very high spiritual level. We are dissatisfied at our worldly levels, whereas Swamiji was dissatisfied at his spiritual level. Sometimes we do come across people who are pretty dissatisfied with their spiritual growth, and they want to give up the world. They want to give up everything that they have. They cannot. Swamiji was in a similar plight. But 7 years is a very long time. It was not 1 month, 2 months, 7 years. And Swamiji must have wondered that why, like somebody possessed, he's moving around the entire country and trying to see something here, trying to see something there, trying to learn something here, trying to pick up something there. Now, what exactly he was looking for, what exactly he was searching for, and what exactly was the gain of his 7 years of struggle, 86 to 93. Sri Ramakrishna passed away on 16th August 1886. Swamiji appeared at the World Parliament of Religions on 11th September. So it was roughly 7 years. So he was in Kolkata also during the period, but during that period he was doing lots of things when he was in Kolkata, and he moved around the country twice, throughout the country. It could not have been evident at that time. But now, when we are standing, say, 100 years away from him, we can see things in perspective. We can see things more clearly. And what is that clarity? Now, when you look at Swamiji's life during those 7 years, he saw things and he experienced things and he interacted with people which he could have never done if he was in Kolkata. See, when he was in Kolkata, he had seen poverty. He had seen caste restrictions. In his own family, when his father was there were caste restrictions. But when he moved around the country, he saw these stark realities, the sheer nakedness of poverty, the sheer selfishness of the local rajas and local kings, and lack of education, lack of fundamental health care, very basic health care, basic education, things like that. But most importantly, that Swamiji had the divine plan that was working, the glory of consciousness that was making him move. It was his interactions with some very famous persons of the country during that period. When I first this question came to my mind, that was long ago, must have been around 1989, 90. And then I could solve it after 6-7 years of constant thinking. So whenever some puzzle, some riddle, some question comes to my mind, I keep thinking over it till the time that solution comes. Now, most of the things that Swamiji saw throughout the country, he could have seen in Kolkata too. The speciality was that he interacted with likes of Khetri Naresh, king of Khetri. Khetri was not a very large state, but it was. And then there were very famous personalities, When Swamiji was in America, and when the Christian fathers started spreading lies against him, he needed all the support of all these great people. And it is they who wrote letters to American people and news items in newspapers that, well, they knew Swamiji and that he was a man of high learning and character, etc. And that was going to be such a big support when he was working in America. Now, you see, Swamiji's ego was stopping him from certain things, and the divine principles was making him run through this and through discontent. Now, if Swamiji had kind of stuck up with Pavari Baba, maybe he could have moved to America and things like that. But this whole thing would have been missed out. This is what happens with us too. There is that divine will, and there is also my own ego. My own ego is also part of that divine will only. But once we realize that divine will is superior to my ego, we need to break down that ego. What is that ego? The world that we have created, which includes our thought world. We have certain thoughts. There are certain thoughts we love and we like to hold on to that. When we find contrary things coming, even we find that the arguments are there and everything is going against us, we don't want to give up that which is wrong. So that is the first thing. Swamiji continues, enjoyment is the million-headed serpent that we must tread under foot. Serpent. They need to be treated under foot. We renounce and go on, then find nothing and despair. But hold on. This is what happens. See, once you start giving up the world, you suddenly find there is nothing. When you make a jump, supposing those of you who might have climbed trees and jumped from branches to branches, or might have seen a monkey jumping. So once you jump from one branch to hold on to the next, there's that small space when you're not holding on to something. And that's a very terrifying moment. And that is what makes many people scared of taking the plunge in spiritual life. Whatever little you might have in the world, you are holding on to that, and you know that you are secure there. Once you say that you are coming to spiritual life, you are now hanging in space without any support. There is no support. But hold on, it will come. Hold on, it will come. The world is a demon. To think, those of you who are listening, if you go and tell your family, your wife and your children or your husband that the world is a demon, my God, they won't let you listen to these talks ever again. It's a kingdom of which the puny ego is king. Put it away and stand firm. Those of you might have noted the famous sculpture of Nataraj. There, Lord Shiva is dancing and he is standing on a demon, Apasmar. It's a demon. This world is a demon. You need to stand upon it and then dance. And then alone comes that dance, the cosmic dance that makes you master of the world. Give up lust and gold and fame and hold fast. Now, what is this ego? And what is purity? Because purity we will be discussing. We just mentioned that from purity and silence, out of purity and silence comes the word of power, which we will take up. Purity is, in its crudest sense, to give up your attachment to Kamini, Kanchan, Namayash. Wealth, sex desires, enjoyment, and fame. Unless you give up the three crudest of identifications, there is no way that you can move forward. And then there are subtler ones. Purity means to give up. Actually, at a higher level and at the highest level, purity means to give up every kind of selfishness, every kind of selfishness. The slightest exclusiveness that there might be in you has to be given up. At the crudest level, the desire for wealth, the desire for enjoyment, and the desire for fame. You will say, how can we do it? Well, you're not supposed to do it because you're living in the world. You're not yet ready for the spiritual life. Secondly, if you say that, okay, fine, we had our of enjoyment in the world, now we want to move over. Now want to move on. We want to be more and more spiritual. Then, well, try to cut down on enjoyment. Try to cut down on your desire for fame. More importantly, try to cut down on accumulation of your wealth. There is no end to accumulation. It's a bottomless pit. You go on pouring, if you had physical money, you could have said, okay, fine. When this almirah is filled with notes, I'll stop. Now, when it comes to bank accounts, there is no way of knowing. You keep on adding zeros to your account and you are not even conscious of it. Hold fast to the Lord by giving up all those. And at last, we shall reach a state of perfect indifference. The idea that the gratification of the senses constitutes enjoyment is purely materialistic. There is not one spark of real enjoyment there. All the joy there is a mere reflection of the true bliss. No, in ninth chapter of Gita, towards the end comes a very famous, very beautiful verse, personally which I have made the ideal of my life. How to live in the world. See, I gave up world when I was pretty young and naturally immature. Then my identity became one with the Ramakrishna mission. Now, when you give up your family and you join the Ramakrishna mission, there's a possibility that the intensity that you had with your family, that intensity will continue in the Ramakrishna mission too. But in Ramakrishna mission, your that intensity cannot continue to grow because you are often transferred, and there may be difference of opinions which might cause this or that. Now, but apart from all this, a time comes when every monk has to realize, because Gita is not meant for monks, Gita is meant for householders. But at least for a monk who has given up everything, he has to realize one very important fact where Lord tells, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajaswaman. This world is non-eternal. There is nothing permanent here. Asukham. Now, asukham means there is not an iota of pleasure here. There is not an iota of happiness here. Acharya Shankaracharya Adi Shankara, while writing commentary on this, he beautifully says, Sangsare na sukham gandha matrasya piyasti. Even just the smell, even a little flavor of sukha is there. If you say that even a little smell, forget about the whole thing. Those of you who enjoy some delicacy, you know that, okay, you may not get the delicacy, but at least the smell of it, even that smell is missing here. Smell of happiness. And that is why Sri Ramakrishna used to give the example of a camel eating thorn. When a camel, while traveling through the desert, eats the thorn, the popular belief in our side is that it cuts its tongue. Of course, it doesn't, because its tongue is pretty thick. And the blood comes out and it enjoys its own blood. In this world, every time you think that you are enjoying, Actually, it's your own blood coming out. And in case you feel that there is some kind of happiness, some happiness in wealth, some happiness in enjoyment, you have wife, you have children, you have kids. Swamiji says it's a mere reflection of the true bliss that you actually are. Atman is the only reality, and Atman alone has bliss. Atman is bliss. It's a reflection. Very poor reflection is what we call happiness in this world. When we run after all this happiness in this world, we forget that first, sukhasya gandha matram nasti. Even the smell, just the smell of sukha is not here. And secondly, the little that is there, if at all, is a reflection of the true bliss that we are supposed to acquire, we are supposed to get. So, anityam asukham lokam. Arjuna, note that in this world there is no happiness and this world is non-eternal. Knowing this, give up this world, move towards me. Move towards me. So, whenever something wrong happens with me, whenever I'm in some kind of pain, or nobody causes me pain, all the pain is here, everything comes out from here, I remind myself, Anityam Asukham Lokam. Lokam means world. Not only this world, even the heavens. And move towards the Lord. Move towards the Lord. Those who give themselves up to the Lord do more for the world than all the so-called workers. So, you'll find this mushrooming growth of the NGOs, and they're trying to do good to the society. And every now and then, in India, of course, they are in news for all the wrong reasons. Sometimes they are into spying, sometimes they are into spreading communal hatred, sometimes they are doing this, doing that, sometimes they're also doing good. Those who give themselves up to the Lord do more for the world than the so-called workers. All these workers, during Swamiji's time, not so many social workers were there, but there were. Social workers will always be there in the society, in everywhere. There will always be some people who want to do good to others. But social work itself, even though done with most intense sincerity, cannot compare with the good done by those who have given themselves up completely to the Lord. It's just not possible. Because when you want to serve others, you give up selfish. You have to give up some amount of selfishness. You become inclusive to a great extent. But a person who has given himself completely to the Lord is completely inclusive. There is nothing exclusive about him. And it is they who really do good to the society. Not that social workers do not do good, they do. But ultimately their contribution in the long range, you will see, is meager. One man who has purified himself thoroughly accomplishes more than a regiment of preachers. Out of purity and silence comes the word of power. Those of you who have this book, Inspired Talks, or those of you who have this complete works of Swamiji, which you might be going through right now when we are having this talk, you will see that even in complete works, this sentence, out of purity and silence comes the word of power. This is printed in italics. And very good of them, because it's a very powerful sentence. And when I was a young monk, I had this quotation written and pasted on in my room. Out of purity and silence comes the word of power. If you really want that your word should have power, practice purity, practice silence. Once I was reading a piece by Khalil Gibran, And Khalil Gibran is famous writer of many works. He was also a very good artist. Prophet is one of his very famous works, and it's inspired work. And Khalil Gibran, that article he says, I know many of my writer friends who have a very good time in some bar, some cafe. They talk, they shout, and then they go back to their desk and start writing. And then he says, I wonder how they can write. Unless a person has silence, how can that person write? Coming from Khalil Gibran. Orhan Pamuk, when he was writing My Name is Red, for which he got the Nobel Prize, for months and months and months, he was completely locked inside a room. And he had sent his wife and his daughter to America. And he was living like a mad person. And every week, once a week, his father used to come, knock, and take him out to a good restaurant so that he could have good meal at least once a week. At other times, he was not even paying attention. And he wrote, and he wrote. When you practice silence, you write masterpieces. But when there is purity, as we mentioned, purity at the crudest level is to get out of the desire of wealth, enjoyment, and fame. If purity is added to silence, then comes the power. All of you know the story of Jesus when there was this fallen woman who was to be stoned as per the Jewish laws, and Islamic countries still practice that. And Jesus says, those of you who has not sinned will cast the first stone. Nobody did. Nobody could object to what Jesus said. Or Lord Buddha, when he told Angulimal, the famous robber killer, stop. Angulimal stopped. Most importantly, this is again my favorite incident from Swamiji's life. When Swamiji, after his all his touring in India, finally reached the World Parliament of Religions on 11th September and addressed the audience as sisters and brothers of America, we all know that history was created and the entire audience got up and clapped. Why? Now, this was something which had made me think deeply. What exactly might have happened that made the audience get up and say and clap? Swamiji himself later gives the answer. That behind those words was the complete purity, the power of brahmacharya. That is, Swamiji had never seen any female with the idea of sex. That level of purity, where Swamiji was not into fame, he was a sannyasi, he was not into wealth, and nor was he into any kind of enjoyment. And of course, there was silence. He was a person of meditation. And so when he spoke those 5 words, sisters and brothers of America, not only that the audience got up, even today India resonates with that. Every time you think of Swami Vivekananda, you think of sisters and brothers of America. This is the power of word that comes from purity and silence. Why nobody listens to us? Because neither we have silence nor we have purity. Why the country listened to Gandhiji? Because when he was into it, although he had not done it throughout his life, but the nearest that we can think of saintliness was in Gandhiji. He had purity, he had silence. He had controlled his mind. And there was purity. There was no selfish motive. And the little that he had, it was about India. Why Netaji succeeded, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose? Because he may not have been as silent as, say, Gandhiji or Swamiji, but his motives were very pure. So every time you will see that someone has very powerful personality about him, and his words continue to resonate. You'll see that there is purity and there is silence. Unless there is silence and unless there is purity, be it Buddha, be it Jesus, be it anybody, the words will not carry weight unless these two forces are there. In our ancient scriptures, there is mention of Brahmastra. In Brahmastra, it was not only the arrows, it could be anything. Sri Ramachandra, he very famously once he took a blade of grass and made it powerful with the mantras and threw it. And it was a Brahmastra. It would it would destroy the person at which it was directed. Important thing is not arrow nor blade of grass. The important thing is the power, the energy that is pushing it forward. Purity and silence is that massive force, massive energy that pushes the words forward. And then those words not only become immortal, they charge us up. So from there, these are the two things that we mentioned. And the last thing Swamiji talks about Keshav Chandra Sen and Sri Ramakrishna. Those of you who know little about Sri Ramakrishna's biography would know that Keshav Chandra Sen was a famous reformer and speaker of his times, and Swami Vivekananda was greatly influenced by Keshav Chandra Sen. So Swamiji comparing says that be like a lily, stay in one place and expand your petals, and the bees will come of themselves. So there was a great contrast between Keshav Chandra Sen and Sri Ramakrishna. The second never recognized any sin or misery in the world, no evil to fight against. Social workers, they see sin, and Keshav Chandra Sen, he was influenced greatly by Christianity, so he would see sin and evil. The first was a great ethical reformer, leader, and founder of the Brahmo Samaj. After 12 years, the quiet prophet of Dakshineshwar had worked a revolution not only in India but in the world. In the world, Swamiji mentions, because even before Swamiji had gone to the West, Max Muller had already written about Sri Ramakrishna. The power is with the silent ones who only live and love and then withdraw their personality. They live and love. So these great prophets, they live, they love, they withdraw. It's like the reflection of moon caught in the pond. The fish play with that reflection all night. In the morning, when the moon is gone, the fish wonder what was that. Prophets are like that. They never say me and mine. They are only blessed in being instruments. Such men are the makers of Christ and Buddhas, ever living fully identified with God, ideal existence, asking nothing and not consciously doing anything. They are the real movers, the Jivan Muktas, absolutely selfless, the little personality entirely blown away, ambition non existent. They are all principle, no personality. Now, I squeeze the entire thing just to make one thing clear. Those of you who have been listening to these talks intently, if somebody asks you, what's the goal of life? When I was writing my book, Carving a Sky, I was working on these life principles, and then I came up with this idea of inclusiveness. Goal of life is to be inclusive. How to be inclusive? How do you truly become inclusive? By practice, of course. But there is no single way to explain life and the ideals of life. One beautiful way where we can say what should be the goal of life, what should be the ideal of life, and to explain how inclusiveness comes in life is to make it firm in the mind, not to be a personality, but to be a principle. Here I am, Samarpanananda. I have three distinct personalities in me. One is the Samarpananda, the person. Second is Samarpananda, the principle. And in between is Samarpanananda, the personality. A common man is just a mere person. He has nothing. He has no achievement, nothing. Now, when he wants to be successful, when you find that everybody wants to be successful in today's world, basically he wants to make a name for himself. He wants to be a personality. It's definitely much better than doing nothing. At least you find that Rajas, the energies within him is aroused. Every time every time a person wants to be something, there was Napoleon and there was Alexander the Great and there was Shakespeare. They're all personalities, great personalities. But greater than them are when a person becomes one with the principle. For example, let's take my favorite example of Gandhiji. Gandhiji was a very ordinary person, a very ordinary lawyer, in fact, a failed lawyer. And at some point of time, he started experimenting with his life. And from there, he came up with those simple principles, truth and nonviolence. And he decided that now onwards, he will never indulge in falsehood, nor will he ever be violent. And from person, he started becoming a personality. And he did not stop at that. He continued. And today you will see that words like when they say somebody, Gandhigiri, essentially it means that he is trying to practice non-violence to the extent that even if he is hurt, he will not counterattack. Gandhiji became one with the principle. But there also that there were shortcomings, and that is what differentiates him from being a prophet. Now, when we look at, say, the life of Sri Ramakrishna or the life of Jesus, they had become one with God. That is the principles. When it comes to our own life, your life, take up one principle, and just one principle, and say that I want to be one with it. I want to be one with it. Whatever that be. You want to be one with God. You want to know yourself. You want to be established in love. For example, in Carving a Sky book, I mentioned how there can be four ideals: Vidya, Sampad, Seva, Tyag. You dedicate yourself to some learning. You dedicate yourself to creating wealth for the society. You dedicate yourself to the service of all, or you give up everything for God. I classified these principles into these four. And of course, there is no end to that. There can be any kind of principle. For example, there was Immanuel Kant. He was so punctual that people would set their watches right just by seeing where Immanuel Kant was. Even in the afternoons, he used to go out on a walk. And he was so meticulous and so punctual. Take up some idea. Dedicate yourself completely to it. And so completely that you become one with the principle. That is the goal of life. Being the desire to be a personality, the desire to be recognized is actually born of the desire to have fame. But when you say that, I want to be one with the personality, you have gone beyond everything. See, when it comes to me personally, I belong to the Hindu tradition, I belong to the Vedantic tradition, I belong to the Ramakrishna mission, Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition. But now, those popular Hindu stories, Vedantic stories, or even the stories from Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition about this incident, that incident from the life of disciples of Sri Ramakrishna or Sri Ramakrishna himself does not attract me much. In fact, I have even started forgetting. I now go all out for principles. The principles that are universal. The principles that get reflected in Buddha and in Jesus and in Sri Ramakrishna and in Shankaracharya. Because principles are completely beyond time and space. Personalities are confined in time and space. And a person is completely rooted in time and space. If Sri Ramakrishna loved jalebi, it is something which is conditioned by time and space. But how to love God? How Sri Ramakrishna loved God? This is a principle which cuts across time and space. And when you look at the life of any prophet, you find that they were also dedicated to that principle. Principle is something which is completely beyond time and space. Who recognizes you, who praises you, who gives you something or who cares for you, forget everything. Dedicate yourself to a principle. Whatever that principle, be ready to pay any price for that. Now, if you find that you are not ready to pay price for that, then give up that principle, take up something else, take up something easy. Because at the higher level, all principles are same. And says that they are all principle, no personality. These people who are dedicated to God, persons like Jesus and Buddha, they are not persons, they are principles. Lord Buddha also says, Buddha is a state, is not a person. Sri Ramakrishna, he's a bhava. He's an idea. Sri Ramakrishna is an idea. He's a principle, not a person. Now, when we are worshipping Sri Ramakrishna, we are worshipping that idea, we are worshipping that principle. So, well, that's the idea. Our time is up. We need to shut down. So, we succeeded in completing the talk of 26th June. And next, we begin 27th June. I am not sure. I didn't check the calendars. I think next Tuesday we will have Inspired Talks. And after that, there will be a break for Durga Puja. And on Saturday, we will have Raj Yoga. For some reason, last Saturday we had to do Inspired Talks. This Saturday we will have Raj Yoga. So we end here. Thank you so much.